Um, my name is Hortense, and I am 32 years old. For 8 years, I sacrificed everything to save $120,000 for my MBA dream. Growing up as the less favored child compared to my golden sister Emma was difficult, but nothing prepared me for the ultimate betrayal. Last spring, I discovered my parents had emptied my account to help Emma buy her dream house. The devastation nearly broke me until an unexpected ally stepped in with a plan for justice. Before I tell you how my parents betrayed me and how my uncle's ruthless plan restored everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of family betrayal and sweet justice. I grew up in a quiet middle-class suburb of Chicago, where from my earliest memories I understood that I was somehow less important than my younger sister. Emma was 4 years younger, and from the moment she was born, the dynamics in our house shifted dramatically. While most siblings experience some jealousy when a new baby arrives in our house, the preferential treatment never balanced out as we grew older. Our parents, Richard and Diane, made their favoritism painfully obvious. My father was a stern accountant who rarely showed emotion, except when it came to Emma. His face would light up when she entered a room, while I received only critical assessments and lectures about responsibility. My mother, a former beauty queen with not-so-subtle narcissistic tendencies, saw Emma as an extension of herself. They shared the same blonde hair and delicate features, while I inherited my father's more angular face and brown hair. The contrast in how they treated us was stark in every aspect of our lives. Emma's birthday parties were elaborate affairs with professionally decorated cakes, bounce houses, and dozens of guests. For my 16th birthday, my parents forgot entirely until I mentioned it at dinner the night before. They hastily bought a grocery store cake and gave me a gift card. But Emma's Sweet 16 was a different story. They rented a party venue, hired a DJ, and bought her a used car with a big red bow. I remember standing in the corner during her party, watching my parents beam with pride as Emma twirled around in her new designer dress. No one noticed when I slipped out early to finish my homework. The pattern continued with school events. My parents attended every one of Emma's soccer games and dance recitals, cheering enthusiastically from the sidelines. Meanwhile, when I won the state mathematics competition in junior year, neither of them could make it because Emma had a minor cold and needed attention. Christmas mornings told the same story year after year. Emma's pile of gifts always towered over mine. When I was 14, I started keeping track in a small notebook I hid under my mattress. One Christmas, Emma received 22 presents while I got 7. The following year, it was 18 to 5. The disparity wasn't just in quantity but quality. She received new electronics and trendy clothes while I got practical items like socks and school supplies. Despite their obvious favoritism, my parents maintained the narrative that they loved us equally. My father would say, "Emma just needs more support. You're so independent, Hortense." My mother was less subtle, often commenting, "Emma is more sensitive than you. You can handle less attention." Emma quickly learned to use this dynamic to her advantage. She was pretty and charming, but also manipulative. She knew exactly how to work our parents with tears or affection to get what she wanted. By the time she was a teenager, she had mastered the art of emotional manipulation, often at my expense. The only person who saw through Emma's act was my Uncle Jake, my father's younger brother. Uncle Jake was different from my father in every way. Where Dad was rigid and conventional, Uncle Jake was a free spirit who had built a successful real estate development business through unconventional methods and sheer determination. He never married, but lived a life full of adventure and financial success. During family gatherings, I would often catch Uncle Jake watching our family dynamics with a frown. Once, after Emma had thrown a tantrum to get out of helping with dishes, while I silently cleaned up, he pulled me aside. "You know you're worth 10 of her, right, kid?" he said quietly. That simple acknowledgement meant everything to me. Uncle Jake became my silent ally, occasionally slipping me extra birthday money or sending me books about successful women in business. He never had children of his own, but he treated me more like a daughter than my own parents did. My coping mechanism became academic excellence and financial independence. If I couldn't earn their love, I would earn their respect through achievement. I threw myself into my studies, joining every academic club and competition I could find. While Emma was being crowned homecoming queen, I was winning scholarships and planning my escape. By senior year, I had secured a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I showed it to my parents at dinner, hoping for some acknowledgement of my achievement. "That's nice, honey," my mother said distractedly before turning to Emma. "Tell Hortense about your lead in the school play." The conversation immediately shifted to Emma's role as Juliet, and my scholarship was forgotten. Later that night, I called Uncle Jake to share my news. He was ecstatic, promising to take me out to celebrate the next time he was in town. At least someone was proud of me. The day I left for college was both heartbreaking and liberating. My father gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder, and my mother reminded me to call Emma regularly, because she'll miss you so much. I packed my meager belongings into my secondhand car and drove away, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness about leaving, but from the realization that even my departure was about how it would affect Emma. As I watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so successful and fulfilling that I would never need to depend on my parents for anything again. College was like breathing fresh air after a lifetime of suffocation. At Northwestern, no one knew me as Emma's sister or the less interesting daughter. For the first time, I was just Hortense, a bright student with potential. I threw myself into my studies with the same determination that had gotten me through childhood. My finance and economics professors noticed my aptitude and work ethic, often asking me to stay after class to discuss concepts further. By sophomore year, I had caught the attention of the department head, who recommended me for a prestigious summer internship at Goldman Sachs. That summer in New York changed everything. Working with successful finance professionals showed me what was possible. My supervisor, a tough but fair woman named Jennifer, became my first real mentor. Unlike my parents, she criticized me to help me improve, not to tear me down. She praised my analytical skills, but pushed me to develop my presentation style and networking abilities. "In this business, being right isn't enough," she told me. "You have to make people want to listen to you." I took her advice to heart, joining Toastmasters and forcing myself to attend networking events despite my natural introversion. By the end of the summer, Jennifer offered me a conditional post-graduation position, contingent on maintaining my GPA. I returned to Northwestern with renewed purpose. I graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in finance and economics, and true to her word, Jennifer brought me into her team at Goldman Sachs. My entry-level position paid well, but living in New York was expensive. I remembered the financial insecurity of my childhood and was determined never to experience that again. While my colleagues splurged on designer clothes and weekend trips to the Hamptons, I lived with two roommates in a cramped apartment in Queens. I brought lunch from home, took public transportation, and tracked every penny in a detailed spreadsheet. Each month, I automatically transferred 40% of my paycheck into a high-yield savings account that I named MBA Fund. I had researched top business schools and knew that getting an MBA from an elite institution would dramatically increase my earning potential and career ceiling. The top programs cost well over $100,000 for tuition alone, not counting living expenses and the opportunity cost of leaving the workforce. During those years of saving, I developed a close friendship with my coworker Zoe. Unlike my childhood friends who had either sided with Emma or grown tired of my family drama, Zoe provided genuine emotional support. She came from a similar background of family dysfunction and understood my determination to succeed on my own terms. "Family is supposed to lift you up, not hold you down," she would say during our Friday night discussions over cheap wine in her apartment. My contact with my parents during these years was limited to obligatory holiday visits and occasional phone calls. Each time I went home, the dynamics remained unchanged. Emma had drifted from job to job, never staying in one place long enough to build a career. She worked briefly as a real estate agent, then as a personal assistant, then at a boutique clothing store. Each position ended with some dramatic story about unreasonable bosses or toxic workplaces. Meanwhile, her financial irresponsibility had only worsened. She had maxed out multiple credit cards, taken out an expensive loan for a luxury car she couldn't afford, and developed a serious shopping addiction. During one Christmas visit, I noticed shopping bags from high-end stores piled in her old bedroom price tags, still attached to unworn clothes. Yet somehow, my parents continued to enable her. They paid off her credit card debt, covered her rent when she couldn't, and still treated her as the favored child. At dinner, they would praise my financial independence and career success while simultaneously undermining it. "It's so nice that you're doing well, Hortense," my mother would say. "But don't you think you work too much? Emma has such a balanced life with her friends and hobbies." I would bite my tongue knowing that Emma's balanced life was funded by our parents' retirement savings. I focused instead on my growing MBA fund, which represented my ticket to a future beyond their influence. By the 8-year mark at Goldman, I had been promoted twice and had saved exactly $120,000. I had researched MBA programs extensively and decided to apply to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and Columbia. My work experience, academic record, and glowing recommendations from Jennifer and other senior colleagues made me a strong candidate. The application process was grueling, requiring months of preparation, essays, and interviews. When the acceptances started rolling in, I was ecstatic. I had been admitted to all 4 programs, with Wharton offering a small merit scholarship. After careful consideration, I decided that Wharton was the best fit for my goals in investment management. The first person I called with my news was Uncle Jake. He had followed my career with genuine interest, occasionally sending articles about women breaking glass ceilings in finance or books by female CEOs. "I always knew you had it in you, kid," he said when I told him about Wharton. "You're going to outshine everyone in that family, mark my words." His faith in me meant everything. We talked for an hour about my plans for business school and beyond. He offered to help financially, but I proudly told him about my savings. $120,000 all saved on my own, I said. Enough for tuition and most of my living expenses. "That's my girl," he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Independent to the core." With my acceptance secured and my savings in place, I felt a sense of optimism I hadn't experienced before. For once, my future wasn't defined by what my family thought of me or how I compared to Emma. I was charting my own course based on my values and ambitions. I had proven to myself that I was capable, resilient, and worthy of success. As spring approached, and I prepared to give notice at Goldman Sachs, I felt like I was finally stepping into the life I was meant to live. What I didn't realize was that the worst betrayal was yet to come, and it would shake the foundation of everything I had built. It was a Tuesday morning in April when my world collapsed. I was at my desk reviewing a client portfolio when an email notification popped up from my bank. "Confirmation of transfer, $120,000. My heart stopped. I hadn't made any transfers. With shaking hands, I logged into my account and stared in disbelief at the balance, $427.38. My entire MBA fund, the culmination of 8 years of sacrifice and discipline, was gone. My first thought was identity theft. I called the bank in a panic, holding on through 15 minutes of mind-numbing hold music before reaching a customer service representative. "I need to report a fraudulent transaction," I said, my voice higher than normal. "Someone has emptied my savings account." The representative pulled up my information. "Yes, I see the transaction you're referring to. This was a wire transfer authorized yesterday afternoon using your account information and security questions." "But I didn't authorize anything." "According to our records, the transaction was completed in person at our Chicago branch. The individual presented your ID and knew all your security information." Chicago. My mind raced. I hadn't been to Chicago in months, but my parents lived there, and they had access to my personal documents in my childhood bedroom. "Can you tell me where the money was transferred?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "The funds were transferred to Richard and Diane Walker at First Midwest Bank." My parents. They had somehow impersonated me and stolen my entire MBA fund. The room started spinning, and I gripped my desk to steady myself. I hung up with the bank and immediately called my parents home. My mother answered on the 4th ring, her voice cheerful. "Hortense, what a nice surprise. We were just talking about you." "Mom," I said, struggling to keep my voice even, "did you and Dad take money from my savings account?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Oh, that. Yes, we needed to borrow your MBA money for something important." The casual way she admitted to stealing my life savings made my blood run cold. You borrowed $120,000 without asking me. That's not borrowing, Mom. That's stealing. Don't be so dramatic, Hortense. It's for Emma's house down payment. She's pregnant, and they found the perfect family home in Winnetka. You know how competitive that market is. They had to move quickly. Emma, pregnant, house in Winnetka. The information hit me in waves. Emma had never mentioned being pregnant during our brief Christmas interaction, and Winnetka was one of the most expensive suburbs of Chicago. You stole my MBA money for Emma's house. I was shouting now, not caring that my colleagues could hear. How could you do that? Emma needs it more than you do right now, my mother said, her voice taking on the defensive tone I knew so well. She's starting a family. Your father and I are going to be grandparents. This is about family, Hortense. And I'm not family. The hurt in my voice was palpable. I heard shuffling, then my father's stern voice came on the line. Hortense, stop being selfish. Emma is pregnant with our first grandchild. They need a proper family home in a good school district. Your MBA can wait. Wait, I've already been accepted to Wharton. I've given notice at my job. I'm supposed to start in August. Then you'll defer for a year, he said coldly. We'll pay you back eventually, but right now Emma's need is greater. You impersonated me at the bank. That's fraud. That's a crime. We're your parents. We've always had access to your accounts, and we raised you, provided for you. Now it's your turn to help provide for the family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In their warped view, stealing my savings was justified because it benefited their favorite child. Put Emma on the phone, I demanded. More shuffling, then Emma's voice sounding uncomfortable. Hortense, I'm sorry you're upset. Did you know the money for your house is my MBA fund? Money I saved for 8 years. A pause. Mom and Dad said it was family money they'd been saving. I didn't know it was specifically yours. Was she lying? I couldn't tell. Emma had always been good at playing innocent. I'm pregnant, Hortense. She continued, her voice softening. 16 weeks. We're having a girl. Mark and I found this perfect house with a nursery that gets morning sun and a backyard with a maple tree for a swing. Mom and Dad just want their granddaughter to grow up somewhere nice. The implication was clear. Their granddaughter mattered. My future didn't. After hanging up, I sat at my desk in shock. Zoe found me there an hour later, staring blankly at my computer screen. What happened? She asked, alarmed by my pale face. When I told her everything, she was livid. That's theft. You need to call the police and report them. They're my parents, Zoe. Parents don't steal from their children. This is criminal. Part of me knew she was right, but another part couldn't imagine having my parents arrested. Despite everything, some stubborn corner of my heart still hoped for their approval, their love. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I contacted Wharton to explain my situation, asking if I could defer my admission. Their sympathy was professional, but limited. They could offer a 1-year deferment, but I would lose my small scholarship. The admissions officer reminded me gently that they had many qualified candidates on their waitlist who had secured funding. I felt physically ill. 8 years of sacrifice gone in an instant. My carefully planned future derailed by the people who should have supported me the most. As I lay awake night after night staring at my ceiling, the familiar feeling of being less important, less worthy than Emma returned with crushing force. But this time it was accompanied by something new: rage. Pure, white-hot rage at the injustice of it all. On the 5th sleepless night, I reached for my phone and called the only person who had ever truly been in my corner. The phone rang 4 times before Uncle Jake's gruff voice answered. It was nearly midnight, but I knew he was a night owl. Uncle Jake, it's Hortense. I'm sorry to call so late. Hortense, what's wrong? You sound terrible. The concern in his voice broke something in me, and I started sobbing. Between gasps, I told him everything. The theft, my parents' callous justification, the derailed MBA plans, all of it. Those selfish, entitled bastards, he growled when I finished. I always knew my brother was a piece of work, but this crosses every line. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants to call the police, but they're still my parents. Listen to me carefully. Uncle Jake said, his voice steady and determined. Do not call the police yet. Do not confront them again. I'm going to help you, but we need to be strategic about this. Can you take a few days off work and come to my place in Lake Geneva? We need to talk in person. 2 days later, I was driving up the winding road to Uncle Jake's lakefront property in Wisconsin. His home was a beautiful timber and stone retreat overlooking the water, a testament to his success in real estate development. As I pulled into the driveway, he was waiting on the porch, his tall frame leaning against a column. Uncle Jake had aged since I'd last seen him at Christmas, his dark hair now fully gray, lines deeper around his eyes. But he still had the same intensity, the same sharp intelligence in his gaze. He enveloped me in a bear hug as soon as I stepped out of the car. "We're going to fix this," he promised. Inside, over cups of strong coffee, Uncle Jake listened as I went through the details again. He took notes occasionally, asking clarifying questions about dates, accounts, and conversations. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "There's something you need to understand about your parents about this whole situation," he said. "This isn't just about favoritism. There's a lot you don't know." Over the next hour, Uncle Jake revealed family secrets that put my entire childhood in a new light. My father, the supposedly responsible accountant, had a gambling problem that had nearly bankrupted them twice. My mother's spending habits were legendary among the extended family, her need to maintain appearances driving them further into debt. "They've been living beyond their means for decades," Uncle Jake explained. "Your father makes good money, but not enough for their lifestyle and Emma's constant bailouts. They've remortgaged the house twice. They've borrowed from every family member who would give them money, including me." "You lent them money?" I was shocked. Years ago, before I realized they'd never change. $20,000 that I never saw again. After that, I cut them off financially, which is why there's been tension between your father and me. Uncle Jake revealed more how my parents had used Emma as the public face of their family, her conventional beauty and charm, helping them maintain their social standing in their status-conscious suburb. How they'd taken advantage of an elderly aunt, convincing her to change her will in their favor. How they'd done similar things to other relatives over the years. "But why tell me all this now?" I asked. "Because you need to understand who you're dealing with," he said firmly. "These aren't just flawed parents who favor one child. They're manipulative people who use others. They used your sister by making her dependent and entitled, and they've used you by making you feel unworthy so you'd keep striving for their approval." His words hit hard, forcing me to reevaluate my entire childhood. All those years I'd blamed myself, thinking if I just achieved more, they'd love me equally. "So what do we do?" I asked finally. Uncle Jake smiled a wolfish grin that reminded me this was a man who had built a fortune by outmaneuvering opponents. "We implement a multi-stage plan," he said. "First, we document everything. The unauthorized withdrawal, the impersonation at the bank, everything. Second, we prepare for a strategic confrontation, one where we hold all the cards. Third, we leverage my business connections. I know every banker in Chicago worth knowing, and believe me, they won't want their fraud made public." He outlined more steps, identifying their financial pressure points, preparing legal consequences, even involving extended family members who had also been burned by my parents. "I could loan you the money for your MBA," he offered. "No strings attached." I was tempted, but hesitated. "I appreciate that more than I can say, but I think I need to get my own money back. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about standing up for myself." Uncle Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I respect that, but the offer stands." As we talked into the night, I felt a different kind of family bond forming, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Uncle Jake saw me for who I was and valued me for it. It was a new feeling, and it gave me strength. By morning, we had a detailed plan of action. It would require courage and resolve on my part, but for the first time since discovering the theft, I felt hope returning. Uncle Jake had shown me that I wasn't alone, and that this betrayal didn't have to define my future. As the sun rose over Lake Geneva, casting golden light across the water, I made another promise to myself. This time, I wouldn't just escape my family's toxic dynamics. I would confront them, overcome them, and emerge stronger. 2 weeks later, we put our plan into motion. Uncle Jake had arranged a family meeting at my parents' house under the pretense of discussing estate planning. My parents, always eager to talk about potential inheritance, readily agreed. Emma and her husband Mark would be there too, as Jake had insisted this involved the whole family. I arrived first, driven by Uncle Jake, who insisted on taking separate cars for strategic purposes. My stomach was in knots as I parked on the street outside the colonial-style house where I'd grown up. For a moment, I considered driving away, accepting the loss of my money as the price of finally cutting ties with my toxic family. But then I remembered Uncle Jake's words: "You deserve justice, and they need consequences." Inside, my mother was in full hostess mode, offering refreshments and chattering about neighborhood gossip. My father sat in his favorite armchair making occasional comments about the stock market to Mark, who looked profoundly bored. Emma, now visibly pregnant, sat on the couch rubbing her belly, the picture of maternal bliss. When Uncle Jake arrived 15 minutes later carrying a leather briefcase, the atmosphere shifted. Despite his friendly greeting, there was an air of authority about him that made my father sit up straighter. After some forced small talk about the weather and the upcoming baseball season, Uncle Jake cleared his throat. "I think it's time we discussed why I really called this meeting," he said, opening his briefcase. "Isn't it about your estate planning?" my mother asked, confusion crossing her face. "No, Diane. It's about theft, fraud, and family betrayal." Uncle Jake's voice was calm but firm as he laid several documents on the coffee table. "It's about how you and Richard stole $120,000 from your daughter." The room went silent. My father's face reddened, and my mother's hand flew to her throat. "That's a very serious accusation," my father said stiffly. "It's not an accusation, Richard. It's a fact. I have the bank records right here." Uncle Jake methodically laid out the evidence we had gathered: bank statements showing the withdrawal, a sworn statement from a bank employee who remembered my mother presenting my ID phone records of my confrontation call. "You committed identity theft and bank fraud," Uncle Jake continued, "both federal crimes with serious penalties." My parents exchanged nervous glances. My father attempted to regain control of the situation. "This is a family matter, Jake. We merely borrowed money from one child to help another. We intend to pay it back." "When?" Uncle Jake asked. "With what money? Your mortgage to the hilt, you've maxed out your credit cards, and you've burned through your retirement savings bailing out Emma. Where exactly is this repayment coming from?" My mother turned to Emma for support. "We did it for you, sweetheart, for our grandbaby. Tell them how important that house is." Emma looked uncomfortable, glancing between her parents and me. "I didn't know the money came from Hortense's MBA fund," she said quietly. "You told me it was family money you'd been saving." "It is family money," my mother insisted. "No," I spoke up, finding my voice. "It was my money. Money I saved by living with roommates, bringing lunch to work every day, and skipping vacations for 8 years. Money for my future." Uncle Jake pulled out another document. "I've spoken with the district attorney, an old golf buddy of mine. He was very interested in this case. Identity theft involving this amount of money carries a minimum 5-year prison sentence in Illinois." The color drained from my father's face. "You wouldn't?" "Wouldn't I?" Uncle Jake raised an eyebrow. "You stole from your daughter Richard, your own child. You betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way. Why shouldn't you face consequences?" "Because we're family," my mother cried. "Funny how family only matters when you need something from Hortense," Uncle Jake replied coldly. "Where was this concern for family when she needed support for her education, when she achieved success on her own, despite your neglect?" My father attempted to regain control. "What do you want, Jake? Money? Is that why you're here? Because if you think you can extort us—" "I want justice for my niece," Uncle Jake cut him off, "and I've already taken steps to ensure it happens. I've contacted everyone in the family about what you've done. Aunt Mildred, Cousin Peter, everyone. They all know how you stole from your daughter to buy your other daughter a luxury home." My mother gasped. "You had no right." "Actually, I did, because they deserve to know what kind of people they're dealing with. Just like your friends at the country club will know, and your colleagues at work and your neighbors." The threat of social humiliation seemed to hit my parents harder than the legal consequences. My mother began to cry while my father's face grew increasingly pale. Emma, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Is this true? Did you really take Hortense's entire savings without permission?" My father nodded curtly. We did what was necessary for family. That's, that's wrong, Emma said, looking genuinely distressed. I wouldn't have accepted the money if I'd known. The house isn't worth destroying our family over. It was the first time I could remember Emma taking my side against our parents. The shock must have shown on my face because she met my eyes with what looked like genuine remorse. Uncle Jake pressed our advantage. Here's what's going to happen. You will return every cent of Hortense's money within 30 days. You will sign a legally binding agreement acknowledging the theft and promising repayment. If you fail to comply, I will personally walk the evidence we've gathered to the police station, the district attorney, and every news outlet in Chicago. My father attempted one more negotiation. 30 days isn't possible. We've already put the money down on Emma's house. Then take out an equity loan on this house, Uncle Jake replied. Sell your vacation property in Michigan. Liquidate your investment portfolio. I don't care how you do it, but you will make this right. As the reality of their situation sank in, my parents' resistance crumbled. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, they had agreed to all of Uncle Jake's terms, signing the agreement he had prepared with his lawyer. As we prepared to leave, Emma pulled me aside. Can we talk privately? Please. I hesitated, then nodded, following her into the kitchen. I really didn't know, she said, tears in her eyes. I swear, Hortense, they told me they'd been saving for years to help us buy a house. I never would have taken your MBA money. I wanted to believe her. After a lifetime of rivalry and hurt, I wasn't sure if I could, but the distress in her eyes seemed genuine. We'll figure it out, I said, not quite ready to forgive, but opening the door to possibility. As Uncle Jake and I walked to our cars, he put his arm around my shoulders. Phase 1 complete, he said with satisfaction. Now we make sure they follow through. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. And in the midst of this family crisis, I had discovered that I wasn't as alone as I had always believed. The month following our confrontation was a whirlwind of activity and emotional reckoning. True to Uncle Jake's prediction, my parents scrambled to meet our deadline, facing the consequences of their actions, for perhaps the first time in their lives. They took out a substantial equity loan on their house, effectively wiping out the majority of their home equity. My father, gray-faced and resentful, liquidated his investment portfolio at a loss. My mother sold her collection of designer handbags and jewelry through a consignment shop, a public humiliation that particularly stung her social pride. Emma contributed too, selling her luxury car and replacing it with a modest used sedan. She also returned several unworn designer outfits and a collection of expensive baby items she'd already purchased. These sacrifices seemed to spark a genuine change in her, a growing awareness of the real cost of the entitled lifestyle our parents had cultivated in her. Uncle Jake ensured every step of the repayment process was documented and legally binding. He brought in his personal attorney to draft agreements, had witnesses present for all transactions, and kept meticulous records of every penny. Never trust verbal promises from people who've already betrayed you, he advised me. 28 days after our confrontation, the full amount was returned to a new account Uncle Jake had helped me set up at a different bank. $120,000, my MBA fund restored. I immediately contacted Wharton to reinstate my acceptance, explaining that my financial situation had been resolved. While I had lost the small scholarship, my place in the program was secured for the fall semester. The family fallout was significant. Word had indeed spread through our extended family, with relatives taking sides. Some older relatives thought I had been harsh in threatening legal action against my parents, while others, particularly those who had experienced my parents' manipulative behavior firsthand, expressed support for my stance. What surprised me most was Emma reaching out privately. She asked to meet for coffee at a neutral location, away from our parents' influence. I agreed with trepidation, unsure what to expect. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between her suburban home and my apartment in the city. Emma looked different, less polished than usual, her pregnant belly prominent under a simple maternity dress rather than the designer clothes she typically favored. Thank you for meeting me, she began, nervously turning her water glass. I've been doing a lot of thinking since that day at Mom and Dad's. About what? I asked cautiously. About everything. about how differently they treated us growing up, about how I never really saw it or maybe didn't want to see it. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Hortense. I'm sorry I was complicit in how they treated you. The apology caught me off guard. In all our years, Emma had never acknowledged the favoritism, let alone apologized for benefiting from it. It's not entirely your fault, I said after a moment. You were a child too. They shaped both of us. But I knew on some level, she insisted. I knew they gave me more, did more for me. And I never spoke up, I just accepted it as my due. We talked for hours, really talked perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. Emma shared her perspective on our childhood, how she'd been simultaneously elevated and restricted by our parents' expectations. They made me the pretty one, the social one, while you got to be the smart one, she explained. It was like they divided traits between us, and we weren't allowed to cross those lines. When I showed interest in academics, Mom would say things like, "Leave the studying to your sister, that's her thing." I had never considered how our parents' favoritism might have limited Emma too in different ways. It didn't excuse her participation, but it helped me understand it better. I'm starting therapy, Emma confessed. This whole situation made me realize I need to understand these patterns so I don't repeat them with my daughter. The mention of her pregnancy shifted our conversation to her impending motherhood. They had found a more modest home in a different suburb, one they could afford without stolen funds. It wasn't the dream house in Winnetka, but Emma seemed genuinely content with the compromise. I want my daughter to know her aunt, she said as we prepared to leave. I want her to know the strong, brilliant woman who stood up for herself even when it was hard. Her words touched me deeply. We weren't magically healed, and years of complicated dynamics couldn't be resolved in one conversation, but it was a start. My relationship with my parents was far more damaged. They complied with the repayment plan, but with cold resentment rather than genuine remorse. When I spoke with them, their conversation was stilted and formal, free of the warmth they still showed Emma despite her role in the confrontation. They need time, Uncle Jake advised when I expressed my hurt. They've never faced consequences before. It's like disciplining a child who's always gotten away with bad behavior. First comes resentment, then hopefully growth. I wasn't sure I believed that growth was possible for my parents, but I tried to maintain perspective. I set firm boundaries around our interactions, limiting contact to brief phone calls and declining their half-hearted invitation to Sunday dinners. Through it all, Uncle Jake remained my steadfast supporter. Beyond securing the return of my money, he offered additional financial support as an investment in your future, setting up a generous stipend to cover living expenses during my MBA program. Consider it the education fund I would have set up if you were my daughter, he said when I initially resisted. I have more money than I know what to do with and no kids of my own. Let me do this for you. His generosity brought tears to my eyes. After a lifetime of feeling like a second thought in my family, having someone prioritize my dreams so wholeheartedly was overwhelming. The evening before I left for Philadelphia to start at Wharton, my parents insisted on hosting a farewell dinner. It was a tense affair with forced conversation and lingering resentment just beneath the surface. My father made a stiff toast to my academic pursuits, while my mother fretted about whether I would be able to find a husband while studying so much. Emma and Mark attended too, bringing a thoughtful gift of professional attire for my internship interviews. The contrast between their genuine support and my parents' grudging acknowledgement was striking. As I packed my car the next morning, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness for the parental relationship I had always wanted but never had. Hope for a new beginning with my sister. Gratitude for Uncle Jake's unwavering support. And beneath it all, a steady confidence in myself and the boundaries I had established. I was going to Wharton not just with my MBA fund restored, but with something more valuable, the knowledge that I could stand up for myself even against those who should have protected me most. As I pulled away from Chicago, I felt not just the excitement of new beginnings, but the satisfaction of having claimed my worth in the most fundamental way. 1 year later, I sat in a sun-drenched cafe near Wharton's campus, reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed. The first year of my MBA program had been challenging, but deeply fulfilling. I had excelled academically, ranking in the top 10% of my class. More importantly, I had built meaningful connections with classmates and professors who valued my contributions and perspective. The healing journey hadn't been easy. During my first semester, I struggled with periodic anxiety attacks and trust issues that affected my group work and networking abilities. Recognizing these challenges, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma, working through the complex emotions stemming from a lifetime of being the less favored child and the acute betrayal of the theft. Healing isn't linear, my therapist would remind me when I grew frustrated with my progress. Some days you'll feel strong, other days the old pain will resurface. That's normal. Gradually, I developed healthier boundaries and expectations in all my relationships. I became more discerning about who I allowed into my inner circle, valuing those who demonstrated consistency and respect. My friendship with Zoe remained strong despite the distance with weekly video calls, where we shared our respective journeys. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I never expected: limited contact, governed by clear boundaries. They never fully acknowledged the wrong they had done, maintaining that they had acted out of family necessity. But the experience had fundamentally altered the power dynamic between us. They could no longer manipulate me with guilt or obligation, because I had seen their true priorities laid bare. Our interactions were now infrequent and brief, mostly holiday phone calls and occasional emails. I no longer sought their approval or measured my worth by their assessment. It was a sad resolution in many ways, but also freeing. I had accepted that they might never be the parents I needed, and that was okay. I had found other sources of support and validation. Emma's transformation had been the most surprising development. Her daughter Lily was now 6 months old, a cheerful baby with Emma's blonde hair and bright smile. Motherhood had changed my sister profoundly, making her more thoughtful and empathetic. She had continued with therapy, working to understand and break the toxic patterns of our upbringing. I look at Lily and can't imagine ever making her feel less important than anyone else, she told me during one of our now regular phone calls. I want both of my children to feel equally loved and valued whenever we decide to have another. We were building a new kind of sisterhood, one based on mutual respect rather than competition. Emma had even started taking night classes in business administration at a local community college, inspired partly by my journey. I always told myself I wasn't smart enough for college because that was your thing, she admitted. Now I realize I can define myself on my own terms. Uncle Jake remained my most steadfast ally. He had become a true mentor, offering career advice and life wisdom. Without the manipulation that had characterized my parents' guidance, we spoke weekly, and he had visited me in Philadelphia twice, proudly touring the campus and taking me and my closest MBA friends to extravagant dinners. More meaningful than his financial support was his emotional investment in my success. He attended my end of first-year presentation, beaming from the front row, as I delivered a complex analysis of investment strategies that earned praise from my professors. Afterward, he introduced himself to my academic advisor as the proud uncle of the most brilliant finance mind in this program. My professional prospects were flourishing as well. I had secured a prestigious summer internship at a top investment firm in New York, with strong indications that it would convert to a full-time offer after graduation. My experience at Goldman Sachs combined with the Wharton pedigree made me a sought-after candidate, with multiple firms expressing interest in my post-MBA plans. Beyond the professional accomplishments, I had developed a chosen family of friends who appreciated me for exactly who I was. My study group had become particularly close, 5 diverse individuals who challenged and supported each other through the rigorous program. We celebrated each other's victories and provided shoulders during inevitable setbacks, creating the kind of unconditional support system I had always craved. As I finished my coffee and prepared to head to the library for a group project meeting, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. I had learned that family isn't just about blood relations, but about who shows up for you consistently. I had discovered my own strength in standing up against injustice, even when it came from those who should have protected me. Most importantly, I had realized that my worth wasn't determined by others' assessment, but by my own values and actions. The theft of my MBA fund, while traumatic, had ultimately forced a reckoning that might never have happened otherwise. It had stripped away illusions and pretenses, revealing both the worst and best of my family dynamics. Through that painful process, I had finally freed myself from the need for validation that had driven me for so long. Looking toward my second year at Wharton and beyond, I felt a sense of peace alongside my ambition. My goals were no longer about proving my worth to parents who couldn't see it, but about building a life that reflected my own values and brought me fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But I had discovered a fundamental truth. Real strength comes not from never being betrayed or hurt, but from how you rise after those experiences. In that rising, you discover who truly stands with you, and more importantly, who you truly are. As I walked across campus, autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet, I smiled at the simple joy of being exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by people who valued me pursuing goals that truly mattered to me, that I realized was the greatest form of justice and restoration possible, not just the return of what was taken, but the discovery of something far more precious, a life built on my own terms defined by love and respect, rather than old wounds and unmet expectations. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences about finding strength through difficult family situations. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to stand up for yourself even when it's difficult.